In a quiet bookstore tucked away in Portland, Oregon, a man in his 50s approached the counter. The young cashier blinked twice. He could have sworn the man was barely 35. It wasn't the skin or the hair. It was something harder to define. An energy. Calm, alert, almost weightless. Curious, the cashier asked, "What's your secret?" The man smiled, not arrogantly, but like someone who'd learned something the hard way. "I stopped reacting," he said. "That's when I started reversing time." And maybe that's the truth no one tells you. Youth isn't something you chase. It's something you protect. Let me explain. 1. Not everyone deserves your emotions. In a small town in Minnesota, a high school teacher stood before her class, weary but calm, and said something her students would never forget. "You're not tired because of life. You're tired because of caring too much for people who don't. There's a quiet kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from overworking your body, but from overexposing your heart. It's the kind of fatigue that builds up after years of saying, 'I'm fine,' while carrying the weight of unreciprocated care, misplaced loyalty, and emotional labor no one asked for, but everyone expected from you. And the truth is, the people who appear the youngest aren't always the ones with the best skincare routine or the most sleep. They're the ones who've learned, through experience or heartbreak, that not everyone deserves access to their emotions. There's something deeply aging about constantly reacting to every slight, every offense, every opinion that doesn't sit well with you. It drains not only your peace, but your presence. Because every time you allow someone else's chaos to become your concern, you hand over your vitality. You become a mirror of their disarray. But the moment you choose to stop responding, not out of apathy, but out of self-respect, something shifts. Your nervous system relaxes, your breath slows, your mind clears, and that clarity radiates, making you appear more grounded, more alive, more ageless. It's not detachment, it's discernment, and that distinction is everything. In New York, a woman in her early 40s who had just gone through a messy divorce once said, "The day I stopped explaining myself was the day I looked in the mirror and realized I hadn't looked that rested in years." Because sometimes the real cause of our fatigue isn't what we do, but who we do it for. When you give your attention to those who constantly take but never give back, you're spending emotional currency that never gets replenished. And the body keeps the score. It shows up as dark circles, tight shoulders, dull skin, and a restlessness you can't name. But once you learn that your emotions are sacred ground, not a public park, you become very selective about who gets to walk through. You begin to protect your peace like it's an heirloom. You respond less. You observe more. You understand that not every battle is yours, not every provocation deserves a reply, and not every invitation to chaos needs your RSVP. Ironically, that's when you start to glow. It's not magic. It's the calm after years of unnecessary storms. It's the freedom of no longer proving your worth to people who wouldn't recognize it anyway. And that freedom, it's what keeps your spirit young. So if you want to preserve your energy, your presence, and yes, even your appearance, start here. Not everyone deserves your emotions. Some things deserve only your silence. 2. The right kind of solitude is the best medicine for healing. In the quiet suburbs of Colorado, a woman once walked away from a life that had drained her spirit for 2 decades. She was a nurse, tireless, compassionate, overcommitted. For 20 years, she gave everything to patients who screamed in pain, families who demanded answers, and supervisors who rarely said thank you. But the hardest part wasn't the long hours or the night shifts. It was the invisible pressure to always be emotionally available, to smile, to reassure, to absorb the chaos of others while burying her own. Then, one morning, after yet another panic attack in the hospital parking lot, she didn't walk in. She walked away. She moved into a modest rental cabin on the edge of a sleepy town, where no one knew her name or her title. There were no 4 a.m. codes, no charting deadlines, no people asking, "Can you just?" Only birdsong and silence. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. Every morning she walked. No destination, no goal, just her breath and the gravel crunching beneath her shoes. The phone stopped ringing. The calendar stopped screaming. Her body, once tense and wound like a coil, began to relax. Not instantly, but gradually, like winter giving way to spring. After 3 months, she noticed something strange. She was sleeping deeper. Her skin had softened. The fine lines around her eyes, once etched by exhaustion, had faded. Not because of a miracle serum, but because for the first time in years, she wasn't performing. She wasn't pretending to be fine. She wasn't pushing herself to be useful. She simply existed. And that was enough. We live in a culture that worships connection, speed, and constant availability. But we forget. What's unrelenting also becomes unsustainable. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do is step away, not because you're weak, but because you've been strong for too long. Loneliness is not always a curse. It can be a sanctuary, a sacred space where your nervous system reboots and your heart recalibrates. When you're alone, you're no longer performing for an audience. You can cry without judgment, laugh without explanation, breathe without permission. In solitude, you remember the rhythm of your own life. You begin to hear your thoughts again, not the ones echoed by others, but the quiet, honest ones, the ones that whisper, "You don't have to keep proving your worth. You don't have to carry everything." And in that surrender, healing begins. When she finally returned to the city 6 months later, people said she looked different, brighter, lighter, younger. They asked what product she used, what diet she followed. She smiled, but said nothing. Because how do you explain that all you did was stop? Stop pleasing, stop rushing, and finally, start breathing. 3. Resisting fleeting desires is an art of staying youthful. In Manhattan's financial district, there was once a man who had everything money could buy, and nothing his soul could hold. He was the kind of man others envied. Sharp suit, corner office, an invitation to every exclusive rooftop party. Every night was a celebration. Every weekend, a blur of noise, lights and indulgence. Champagne at midnight. Laughter that never reached the eyes. Temporary highs that masked a growing void. At 40, he hit a wall. Not a financial crisis, but a spiritual one. He woke up one morning with a hangover that felt deeper than the body. It wasn't about alcohol. It was about a life that had become so loud, so full, that it left no room for meaning. He looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back. The skin was tired, the eyes hollow, the smile mechanical. He realized he had spent years chasing pleasure, but had never once touched peace. So he walked away. He sold the condo, closed the tabs, told his broker he was done. He moved upstate into a cabin with no Wi-Fi, no delivery service, and no distractions. He started learning silence the way some people learn a new language, with clumsy humility. He meditated. He read old books. He grew his own food. The dopamine rush of nightlife was replaced by the slow, sacred rhythm of presence. And a funny thing happened. His body, once bloated from late-night excesses, returned to balance. His skin cleared, his posture straightened. People who saw him years later said he looked younger than he did at 30. But it wasn't because he reversed time. It's because he stopped trying to outrun it. In a world obsessed with more thrills, more likes, more dopamine, he had chosen less. And in that subtraction, he found renewal. Because the body has its own wisdom. It knows when you're living in alignment and when you're not. It knows the difference between satisfaction and stimulation, between nourishment and numbness. Most people age not from time, but from wear, from constantly chasing fleeting highs, from being pulled in 1,000 directions by desires that never rest. But the one who dares to say no to what's convenient in the moment earns something far greater than instant pleasure. They earn clarity, sovereignty, vitality. Youth isn't the absence of wrinkles, it's the presence of discipline. And discipline is the rarest kind of freedom. The man never went back to Wall Street. He didn't need to. He had traded adrenaline for peace, hype for depth. He now spends his mornings watching the sun rise without needing to post about it. And his eyes, those same tired eyes at 40, now hold a quiet fire. Not from living fast, but from finally living right. 4. Silence is the anti-aging cream for the soul. In the buzzing city of Dallas, where ambition often screams louder than truth, a man once sat in a conference room and listened to a lie shape his future. He was being let go, officially due to restructuring, but the room was thick with the unspoken politics of envy and sabotage. He could have shouted, could have slammed doors, demanded justice, exposed the unfairness, but he didn't. He stood up, shook hands, and walked out. Not because he was weak, but because he understood something most people never learn. Silence is not surrender, it's strategy. While others waste energy proving themselves to people who already decided not to see them, the wise conserve that energy for building, not battling, for rising, not reacting. And that's exactly what he did. Over the next year, while former colleagues whispered, speculated, and moved on, he worked, quietly, relentlessly. He built a small company out of his garage, made calls, wrote plans, failed, refined, and kept going. No press releases, no pity posts, just discipline wrapped in silence. 12 months later, that company was profitable. And when it came time to hire, guess whose resume came across his desk? The man who once signed his termination letter. And he hired him, not out of revenge, but because by then he had grown beyond ego, beyond noise. There's something profoundly anti-aging about silence. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of strength, the kind that doesn't need to be heard to be felt. In a culture that rewards the loudest, those who choose stillness often appear untouched. Not because life has been easier on them, but because they refuse to let life steal their peace. Anger wrinkles the spirit. Constant reaction exhausts the body. But silence? Silence preserves. It gives the nervous system space to breathe, the mind room to strategize, and the soul time to remember who it is without the noise of proving. In a world addicted to instant responses, silence is rebellion. And in that rebellion lies freedom. You learn that not every slight needs correction, not every insult requires a comeback. Sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Years later, when people asked how he did it, how he bounced back, how he looked so calm, so composed, he would smile, not because he forgot the injustice, but because he transcended it. He understood. Time cannot age a man who lives above reaction. Wrinkles don't come from years, they come from constant war, and he had simply chosen peace. Not the peace that comes when things go your way, but the peace that comes when your silence becomes your armor. Five. Observing instead of speaking is a sign of inner strength. In a therapy workshop in San Francisco, A renowned psychologist paused mid-lecture and looked around the room. A debate had just erupted among participants, each voice louder than the last, each eager to be right. The doctor didn't intervene. He simply observed. And when the room finally quieted, he said one sentence that cut through the leftover noise like a blade. The calmest person in the room is usually the one everyone listens to, even when they say nothing. That kind of presence doesn't come from volume or dominance. It comes from a deep-rooted stability, the kind that doesn't flinch at chaos, doesn't rush to correct, doesn't seek applause. Because real power doesn't compete, it contains. The people who age gracefully aren't always the most active or outspoken. They are the ones who've learned the wisdom of restraint. They let others talk. They watch the temperature of the room rise and fall without letting it dictate their own. While others burn themselves out trying to win every conversation, prove every point, or defend every opinion, the wise sit back, not in apathy, but in authority. They know not all battles are worth the cost. Not all noise deserves an echo. There is something strikingly youthful about a person who doesn't get pulled into every argument. Their face is less burdened by tension, their breath slower, their gaze clearer, because when you're not always reacting, your nervous system relaxes. You protect your energy, and that protection shows on your skin, in your posture, in the way you move through the world without needing to broadcast your worth. It's tempting, especially when you're young, to equate expression with strength, to believe that being the loudest means being the leader. But over time, experience humbles you. You learn that the most magnetic people aren't always the ones in the spotlight. They're often the ones who speak last, or not at all. And when they do speak, people listen. Not out of fear, but out of respect. In corporate meetings, in family arguments, in everyday life, notice who holds the room. It's rarely the one demanding attention. It's the one who doesn't need it. A man in his 50s once said after decades in high-pressure negotiation rooms, "I used to think the loudest voice won. Now I know. The one who listens the most understands the most. And the one who understands the most always wins, eventually." Stillness is not passivity, it's poise. It says, "I'm not here to win approval, I'm here to preserve my clarity." And clarity, like silence, is timeless. In the end, inner peace isn't just a state of mind. It becomes part of your face, your breath, your presence. And people notice, even when you don't say a word. 6. Choose your companions the way you choose your food. In Seattle, under the endless grey skies and drizzle that seems to wash the city clean, a woman made a quiet decision that changed her life more than any skincare routine ever could. She stopped answering the group chat, not out of spite, but out of exhaustion. These were friends she'd known for years, college roommates, co-workers turned confidants, lunch companions who always ordered judgment with their coffee. Every conversation was coated in complaint. Gossip passed for bonding. Jealousy disguised itself as concern. And comparison was the unspoken language they all understood. At first, she told herself it was normal, familiar, that everyone had friendships like these, full of subtle criticism and emotional residue. But over time, she noticed the toll. Her shoulders were constantly tight. Her mornings felt heavy. Her laughter felt performative. And her face, once bright, had started to mirror the weariness of being emotionally overfed by things that offered no nourishment. So one day, without fanfare, she stepped back. She muted the group, declined the brunch invites, chose silence over surface-level connection. And something miraculous happened. Not overnight, but gradually, like a plant growing toward the light after being moved out of the shade. Her skin changed. Her eyes were clearer in the mirror. She slept deeper. woke up with energy instead of dread. She had removed a toxin, not from her diet, but from her emotional environment. And just like a body detoxifies when given the chance, so does the soul. We often obsess over what to add to our lives, supplements, serums, affirmations, but we rarely ask what we should subtract. Who, not what, is aging us from the inside out? Who do we allow into our emotional diet that offers nothing but empty calories, full of noise, but lacking substance? The truth is, your friendships shape more than your schedule. They shape your nervous system. When you're around people who live in complaint, you inherit their mindset. When you sit at tables full of bitterness, you sip from their cup. And the cost isn't always immediate, but it's cumulative. That's why the people who age gracefully often have one thing in common. They curate their circle like they curate their health. Not everyone gets a seat at the table. Not everyone is safe for your peace. You don't have to announce your departure. You don't have to justify your silence. Just pay attention to how you feel after spending time with someone, and believe it. Energy doesn't lie. In less than 6 months, that woman looked younger, not because of what she applied, but because of what she released. Because sometimes longevity is less about what you pursue and more about what you finally have the courage to walk away from. 7. Live with purpose. No one stays young forever, but you can live deeply forever. In a quiet town in Texas, a man in his 60s rises before the sun. He brews a strong cup of coffee, ties his boots, and heads out to volunteer at the local community center. He isn't paid. No one forces him. And yet, he shows up every day with more energy than people half his age. He's a veteran, weathered, quiet, the kind of man who doesn't speak unless it matters. When someone once asked him how he stays so vibrant, his answer was simple. You stay young as long as your purpose is bigger than your pain. Most people don't age because of time. They age because of stagnation. The days blend, the spark dims. They begin to move through life like it's something to endure instead of something to build. But those who have a reason, real, soul-deep reason, to wake up, never truly grow old. Their eyes stay lit. Their stride holds intent. They radiate something stronger than youth. Direction. A body in motion may stay in motion, but a soul with purpose burns quietly from within, and that flame is what softens the lines on your face and the heaviness in your step. Purpose doesn't eliminate pain, but it gives pain a place to go. It transforms wounds into work, regrets into resolve. You stop asking, "What's the point?" and start answering, "I am." People without direction are more prone to anxiety, irritability, and even physical fatigue, not because they're weak, but because the human spirit wasn't made to drift. It was made to aim, and when it doesn't have something to aim for, it turns inward, begins to rot. You start chasing distractions, comparing yourself, complaining, aging faster, not because your cells are dying, but because your meaning is. That's why the most alive people you'll meet are not always the youngest. They're the ones who live each day with a quiet why echoing inside. The grandmother who raises her grandchildren. The retired teacher who tutors kids for free. The widower who plants trees he'll never sit under. These people do not exist just to exist. They give, build, move forward. Not for applause, but because it makes them feel real. You don't need a grand mission. You just need a reason. Something that pulls you out of bed when everything else says stay. Something that steadies you when life bends you. Because in that purpose, you are reborn again and again. The veteran in Texas doesn't have fewer aches or regrets than the next man, but he has something else. A direction. And when he walks into a room, You don't see a number. You see a presence. That's what makes him timeless. And maybe that's the secret. Not to chase youth, but to chase meaning and let youth catch up. Conclusion. None of the people you've just met live perfect lives. They've faced loss, betrayal, exhaustion, and doubt. But what sets them apart isn't luck or genetics. It's the wisdom to choose differently. They stopped negotiating their peace. They stopped handing their energy to things that didn't nourish them. They chose silence over noise, solitude over chaos, purpose over distraction. And in doing so, they slowed time, not on the clock, but in their spirit. Because real youth isn't skin deep. It's soul deep. It comes from the courage to protect your inner world in a society that keeps trying to invade it. In the end, they didn't escape aging. They just aged with clarity. And that made all the difference. Thank you for watching till the end. See you in the next video.